to the righteous. And he who is upright in the way is abominable to the wicked. They definitely got an opinion of the other, don't they? The unjust man, it doesn't mention his way, it really doesn't have a way. He doesn't really have a standard. The righteous in his way does live according to a standard. But what do they think about the other? Righteous is manifested in this word abominable. It's manifested in hating evil. You just have to determine what that hating or despising evil means. How active is the despising of evil? Or is it just an attitude? Well, it's more than an attitude, because just by definition, noble living is living according to a set of noble principles. One man lives an unprincipled life. One man is disciplined by those principles. What do they think of the other? What's abominable mean? You get the clear picture that both are opposed to the other's lifestyle. That doesn't give them permission to be hateful about it. Not at all. Sometimes we see that not handled in the best way in the world. But you clearly are repulsed by the other's choices. You don't want anything to do with that. Not that you don't ever have anything to do with them, but you just want no part in that. Yes, sir.
Couldn't you also, too, thinking about this, the wicked looks with the foundations of the righteous. We could look at that and say, well, it's okay for us who's righteous to look at them as evil.
And sometimes that happens.
Yeah, and so I think that you can take this scripture and justify your actions just by this right here, if you took it that way. That it's okay to be like that.
And that's not at all what it's saying. But still, you have to do an awful lot of strength, and I don't know how it works, what you have to do to get oil and water to mix when they talk about emulsification. But you've got to change it to get it to work. Well, these are two opposites that aren't going to change. They're not going to mix and ought not mix.
Well, you know what it takes to do that. You have to add another substance. For instance, oil and water. If you put mustard with it, you can shake it up and it will emulsify. So if you think about this situation, if you put love in there, that's what will do it.
Yeah.
Whenever you handle things with love, you're going to dispel that hatred.
You do get the sense, though, as far as living by a noble set of principles, that there's not really any middle ground. We've talked about it before, that righteousness is manifested, that people have a standard, and they're not wishy-washy about it. Doesn't mean you're hateful about it.
Right.
But you're not going to compromise that set of standards. To do so certainly would be sinful. Certainly just the compromising of conscience and a righteous standard would be an abomination. And so there's not really any middle ground. What you think, brother?
Well, 18:2, and I read this last week also, and been thinking about it all week, because it so applies, like you said earlier, to today. It says the fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. And we see that, and you see that in an abomination in the wicked. They don't care. They don't care to understand.
Which verse were you in?
18:2.
Oh, chapter 18:2. Maybe.
They don't care to understand.
No.
So they take no pleasure in it. So that's why it's an abomination, because they're not even trying.
It's just a reprehensible thing. And if you have noticed, and we talked about this in the sermon a couple of weeks ago, you can talk to people about their need of salvation, but if they're content with life as it is, there's nothing you can do unless somebody is provoked by their own sad condition to want something better.
Or their own mindset. We had an example of this is we had a neighbor back in Crackman, and The people who lived there before me had a nice yard, green, pretty, everything's good. This gentleman moved in, and his big thing was to let everybody know he had a PhD. That was his thing. Well, his yard looked terrible, and he had the sprinklers redone, he had it reseeded, and he wouldn't listen to us, the neighbors, that said, you've got to water more than once a week because of the heat down there. And he wouldn't listen. And he would say, well, I have a PhD, I know what I'm doing. I've studied up on this. Never had a good yard, always had a dead yard, would never accept anything other. And that's how people is in the world. They get their own mindset, and they're not changing just because the Bible says something.
It's like I mentioned a few weeks back. The problem with degrees is they say you have completed a course of study. The degree says, I've stopped studying. I already know it all. That's what they say.
Exactly.
I can't tell me that. Well, that's the problem with the degree. It's really just the beginning of it. It's not
Unless your degree is not in horticulture or something along those lines, what difference is it?
And that was the first way that we considered that righteousness is manifest, is that the righteous person is always learning. He's not the knower. He's at least going to consider.
Well, and you and I talked about that. Each phase of our life, we can read the same scripture again, and all of a sudden, a whole new light clicks on. Because it means different where we're at in our life, or more applicable to how we.
And today's sermon is an example of that. I read a passage, I don't know how many times I read it, and I looked at it last week, whoa.
It happens all the time.
And you have to be right place to receive it. And
That's
that,
a continual learning.
that too, how many times does Solomon talk about this, that in any situation, whether you're naive or you are wise, those who are yet learning can use any situation and learn from it. And by that knowledge, gain deeper understanding, a deeper application of the wisdom. And so, it is always a matter of what we're seeking. Let's consider another question. What is the value of righteousness? If you're seeking it, you're determined to practice it, it's got to be because you see some value in it. What's the value? Look at Proverbs 8. Proverbs chapter 8, we'll look at verses 18 and 19. Fairly clear, it gives true riches to life. Proverbs 8, verse 18. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even pure gold, and my yield better than choicest silver. There's obviously a value system here, and a value judgment being made. There's really, it shows a proper balance. That if you seek wisdom first, then you would know how to deal with wealth if it comes. You've got the intelligence to use your wealth correctly. The phrase enduring wealth is not necessarily talking about always having plenty of money. The phrase means you have literally it means having a sustained double portion, having a twice sufficiency. Not necessarily about money. What's the blessings of the righteous? This sense of spiritual blessing. And so there's always this sense that by wisdom and using what you have, using it wisely, there is a sufficiency in that. Those who have wealth, have riches, then there are those who, as we see in so many Proverbs, are willing to use it to bless others. You see the value judgment there in verse 19. My fruit is better than gold. Well, there's a priority there. a spiritual prosperity versus a financial. Yes, the financial one they follow. But what's the true blessing? What's the twice sufficiency? Wisdom more than wealth offers a satisfying life. I've mentioned it before, and I can't remember the early 20th century industrialist, filthy, filthy rich man. And on his deathbed, they asked if he could only have one more thing, what it would be. He said, one more dollar. Wow.
Missed it all.
Missed it. Just one more. Look at Proverbs 11 and verse 18. Proverbs 11 and verse 18, as we consider the righteous, we body automatically or have to consider the opposite of that, the wicked. The wicked earns deceptive wages, but he who sows righteousness gets a true reward. Well, the wicked earns deceptive wages. One of them is actually investing something. The righteous man is actually investing something for what he gets out of it. The wicked, hey, just, give me my money, Jeff. In any way I can get it, just give it to me. If you're sowing and watering righteousness, well, it means you're automatically having to weed out the wickedness. And what's the implication, or what's the generally truth? Then you're going to harvest a barn full of blessings. But there is definitely an investment in it. He who sows righteousness. What's the true reward? What do you really appreciate? I mean, when do you really appreciate something?
11:4.
When you have to...
Chapter 11:4.
Yeah.
Is that one of your verses?
Where you have... Yeah, that's where I had that. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
But that answers your question.
Yeah, it is. And he answers it in 4, 6, and 8.
Yep.
I mean, when is something really valuable to you? When it's just given to you? Or when you've invested yourself into it? And that's, let's go to Proverbs 11:4. Again, you talk about the upright, you're automatically talking a contrast to the wicked. Proverbs 11 verse 4, riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. What good is all that money in the judgment? Righteousness delivers. Not even in the day of wrath, but the confidence that you will be delivered beforehand. We see that in some of these other verses. Look at Proverbs 11, verse 6. The righteousness of the upright will deliver them, but the treacherous will be caught in their own greed. Solomon speaks of this in several ways, sometimes talking about laying their own trap, or a bird being trapped in their own net, their own deceit. The righteous have this confidence, don't they? Again, what's righteousness mean? Those who are devoted to doing what is good, what is fair, what is just. And as that word for righteousness includes also what is good, fair, just, and normal. It is the standard by which their life is known. And living that way, what's the blessing in it? You know that you will be delivered. You're going to be delivering, we'll see shortly, you're going to be delivering yourself from some problems that the wicked are going to be trapped by. The treacherous will be caught by their own greed. Verse 8, the righteous is delivered from trouble, but the wicked takes his place. Where do you get the picture of it? Righteous is being lifted up. He's going to take, and the wicked are being taken down. Yes.
Can you also think that the wicked don't know they're wicked?
Pardon?
The wicked don't know they're wicked because they haven't had the wisdom and the understanding and the knowledge of what wicked is. So a lot of people are ignorant. So is this pertaining more to to someone who has known, or is it?
Or just, if we go back to that first verse we considered today, just doesn't want it. Finds a standard of righteousness as reprehensible.
So he doesn't, so the wicked, I mean, most time don't really think they're wicked.
Well, let's remember the whole progression of learning in the Proverbs. It begins with fear of the Lord.
Right.
And you actually have to seek knowledge. You have to then seek understanding. You have to seek it. Fear is this progression of stuff. And no matter where the wicked first don't fear the Lord.
Right.
So they can't expect anything else really beyond that until they have that kind of heart change.
But I find it hard to think that anyone living in this world does not know the difference between good and evil, and wicked. I mean, let's face it, whether you're of the world or studying the Lord, all our laws and rules of the land are based out of the scriptures. And you know when you're not doing the right thing. Come on, everybody has a conscience whether they want to listen to it or not. But you know.
It depends on what you set your,
Unless you
what
have no
standard
capacity.
you set your conscience on. The Apostle Paul,
But you're
he
still
was
making
doing
that
the right
judgment
thing
call.
whenever he was persecuting the church.
He thought he was doing
He
the right
totally
thing.
thought he was doing God's will. So you have to, people say, well, I've got a clear conscience. That's not always.
But he was also obeying the laws of the land and
Yeah,
doing
he
so.
was. He was. But he
So
was
what
a
I'm
person.
saying is today, people,
A lot of people just aren't willing to make the choice.
right,
Yeah.
Paul realized they change.
Well, there's a higher standard.
And these are people who don't want to change.
You know, a lot of people make the choice to seek righteousness. Some have determined to do it. But don't you find a great many people in the middle just aren't giving it any thought, really?
Yeah.
Well, that was me. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't think what I was doing was wrong until I started
Everybody else
getting
is
the
doing it.
knowledge. I thought that I was fine. I thought I was fine. I didn't, people say, well, you weren't a bad person, Joel, but still, I wasn't doing the right thing. But I didn't think it was wrong until I started, like I said, opening. When you open this up, you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision which way you're going to go. And a lot of times you pick, when I would open this up, I think, this is huge. How am I ever going to get, I don't understand any of this, But then as the more I start studying, the smaller it got. Does that make sense? And then when things started to fit together and I started realizing, oh,
The central principle becomes concise.
Yes.
But even in that, you had a sense of, I need to look at something else.
That's how Jeannie.
Yeah. But that still did something trigger
That's,
that,
it
yeah.
had to
Something
really,
had to
honestly,
trigger
it had to trigger that, or I would have been living, whatever.
And I think that happens to everybody. You even alluded to that a few weeks ago in a sermon, that there's always something that has to trigger you to start searching and make a change.
And it works in different ways with different people.
Everybody's going to be different.
I had to be like totally brought down, before I would listen.
And that's why it's hard to convert people, because until they're ready, or until you touch your nerve, so to speak, they're not going to respond. No matter.
If you go over to Ezekiel chapter 7, he makes this same kind of comparison in Ezekiel. Chapter 7, verse 19. And the ways of the wicked in comparison to the righteous. And the wicked have made a choice, even if they made no choice at all, they have. Chapter 7, verse 19, they will fling their silver into the streets, and their gold will become an abhorrent thing. Their silver and their gold will not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. They cannot satisfy their appetite, nor can they fill their stomachs, for their iniquity has become an occasion of stomach. Do the wicked ever really find satisfaction? I mean, they're essentially, even all that they treasured is, they finally come to, it's proven itself to be worthless. But Proverbs 11 speaks 3 times about being delivered from death. The ways of the righteous doesn't mean they'll never die, but it delivers them from premature death. It delivers them, keeps them from dying because they're just doing something stupid. There is a reason for those standards. There is a value in those standards. Again, by living by my standard, it does keep us out of a fair amount of trouble. Proverbs 12, verse 21. As a general principle, no harm befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Again, the righteous, by their standard, in some degree, rising above, keeping themselves afloat above all the trouble that's surrounding. But the wickedness are, in effect, just mired in it. They can't avoid it. The righteousness produces benefits which, in a sense, nourish and support. Those without any standard really don't have hope. It leads us to probably one of the better known of the Proverbs is Proverbs 14, verse 34. Righteousness exalts a nation, the same mindset, what it does for the individual, it does for the nation. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to many people. Same concept is 12 and verse 12. Doing the right things morally, ethically, it nourishes and supports a nation. What's the contrast? What do you see? When immorality is legitimized, as it is now, when abominable things are legitimized, when it's nationally celebrated, not only is it disgrace, but the nation is going to be mired in trouble, as that says. One's kind of floating above a little bit, got a little buoyancy, and the other one's just way down in it. Yes, sir.
Jeff and I were talking this morning, and I said that the Bible did things a lot different as far as a Christian. Because the bottom line is, being a Christian is harder work than being what you want to say with it. It's easy. It's downhill. It's all downhill. But then you're a Christian, you're going uphill. And it's uphill all until they pass away. So that person, a lot of times people look at this and say, yes, I can't. It's too hard. Well, it really isn't, see. It really isn't, but it is, you have to make an effort. You can't just stand still. There's always an action.
A lot of people just, it seems we're on coasting mode. It's just coast and see where we wind up.
Yeah.
A lot of the world takes that one verse before out of context. It's what my friend Cheryl did, that if you're righteous, you know trouble you're going to have. It's only whenever you do bad stuff you're going to have trouble. Well, if you pluck that out of context, that makes you feel like, well, then what bad thing did I do? Which is what happened with Job's friends, that you must have been terrible for all these terrible things that happened to you. It's, you have to be careful not to pluck something out of context and just stick on one verse, and you have to put it all together. But I know that that's part of what she did. If you're a good girl, then you're going to just have no problems whatsoever. The righteous is delivered from trouble.
Let's remember, we talked about this last week. The Proverbs are really a collection of thoughts that are training ground before you get into trouble, before the decision is forced upon you, before you're in the life and death situation. You're already prepared. It's like in the heat of the moment, what am I to do? No, it's already determined.
I think people have a false sense of security in thinking that once I'm a Christian, I have consequences. But if I'm not a Christian, I don't have consequences. But you're going to ultimately. And I had one person one time tell me, yeah, the problem with being a Christian is you have to care, and I don't want to care for anything.
The bottom line is, it doesn't matter what you think or what you
And
care.
that's what you tell them, ultimately, you're gonna answer. The
Yeah,
problem is, you may not have time to turn.
yeah.
A fair amount of people think if I know the Bible, then I have to obey the Bible. So if I don't know it, I don't.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Try using that on a speeding ticket.
Nice to have that big out.
I didn't know.
So to follow
That doesn't
along
work for you guys.
what you're saying about people, it prepares them. This Bible is so full of many principles. You learn these principles, you apply it to anything. You know, people say, well, it doesn't say I can't do that. Well, it does, but it doesn't say it in specific words that you can't. There's certain things, if you follow these principles, you'll always be in the righteous side of the equation. And they don't get that, you know.
And many of us seen it. I'm sure you have as well, Roger. You see those people that think, well, I know enough, I'm prepared enough, and you stop preparing, and what happens?
Anyway,
It all falls apart. You gotta have this in you before it can affect you.
Is there anything in this life that we don't have to study? I mean, think about it. If someone was gonna, I mean, if you're gonna be a doctor, what are you just gonna walk into a hospital and say, I don't have any schooling, no training, no whatever, and I'm gonna do open heart surgery? And I don't think that's gonna happen.
And it doesn't stop after you get that degree.
Exactly.
Continually.
So a lot of times when you can present it to people like that, hey, how did you get this? Did you have to study it?
How did you
Well, then
reach
how
your
much
goal?
more important one is your soul and eternal life? You're fighting for your life. You're fighting for your life.
It is amazing, and this is the problem with living in the flesh. That people will go to seemingly no ends to something they want that's worldly. But if you ask them to expend some energy towards something that is spiritual, well, I thought God would give me that.
Right, exactly.
I believe in, so I don't have to.
God is love.
And most of us here in this room have learned that it's only when you're expending the energy, investing yourself, is it really of value to you, that you're aware of the value. When it's not like, oh, I've got to go study that thing, but I get to go study. Then it's
Well, people look at it like a gift. The scripture's a gift, but you hand somebody a gift, they now have an action to open it, to get to it, and then use it, or it's nothing. And that's what people don't do with the scriptures. They see it, and they know it's a gift, but they never spend the effort to unwrap it and use it.
Or the other side of that is somebody who will sit there and read it, cover to cover, but not absorb it. It just does not sink in at all. They're just going through the motions of reading it, and it's just so sad.
Look at one more Proverbs 12, verse 7. On the other hand, you've got this situation, whether it's a nation or a person, without standards, and that sin is clearly leading to disgrace. Related to exalting a person or a nation, Proverbs 12 and verse 7. Another way of saying that is, God will establish you. The wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous will stand. This is really judgment language. When you talk about being overthrown, that's powerfully being thrown down. The house of the righteous will stand or will be established. The house of the righteous is already standing. It's on a foundation. It's built. It's square. But when it says will be established, it's being further strengthened all the time. You got a good foundation, but down where we lived on the Texas coast, a lot of good foundations cracked because it was forever shifting down. You had to come in and reinforce it, and keep reinforcing it. And that's the house of the righteous will be established. But the other one, this is like the wise man that built his house upon the sand. it's going to be thrown down and no more. No value in it, no good recollection of it, just washed away. Some would consider it even a good riddance in that fit. The foundation is destroyed. And again, it's what's being taken up and what's being torn down. How many times has God done that throughout the ages? To lift up and tear down. Let's consider, we got a few minutes to start another question. What's God's relationship with the righteous? How does he feel about it? We put human emotions on God. For all who are striving to be obedient, and again, obedient goes with righteousness, it goes with practicing wisdom. How's God feel about it?
Please. Well, please.
Peace, you say?
Please. Well, please.
Oh, pleased. Pleased, and even more than that, we're going to see. We see it in what he does for the righteous. Look at Proverbs 15 and verse 9. Occasionally I have a word that strikes me, and I have to go see what that specific word really means. And this is one of those cases. Proverbs 15, verse 9. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves one who pursues righteousness. What's he talking about? He loves. The word really is a word for how you feel about someone whose ways you consider lovely and whose ways you find lovable. One is an abomination. There's nothing he finds attractive in that person. But this kind of love, for the one who is pursuing righteousness, God so loves that he's pursuing them. It's like when you had that first really bad crush on that girl or guy, and wherever they were, you wanted to go find where they were, and you wanted to do something for them. And when you first were like that, whatever, all you see is what's lovely and what's lovable. And that's how it is for these that are righteous. It's an interesting word. He's strongly attracted. The word does even take a bit of that physical connotation. Being strongly attracted to the one you find lovable and pursuing them. And then implied with that is that he's giving his best to those he loves. So, yes, sir.
Okay, I mean, take your point.
So what does he give? If he finds his children lovely, he finds their ways lovely, and so lovable that he's just attracted to them, what's he want to give to them? What's he want to do for them? Proverbs 15, verse 29. Again, contrasted with the wicked. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayers of the righteous. A little play on words. Usually the opposite of far is near. Here the opposite of far is here. James tells us if we draw near to God, he draws near to us. Well, there's this magnetic mutual attraction between those who seek what is holy and the one who is holy. Begin to, what happens? What's the connection? Righteous standards. Lovely way of living. Lovable attributes. Truth is, it talks about being far away. The truth is the wicked have moved away from God, haven't they? They moved away from God. It's the righteous who are drawing near. And he hears the prayers. When you first were in infatuated with that special someone, didn't want to hear everything they said. Even if she included way too many details. You know, come on, let me know what you're thinking, let me know what's on your mind, tell me, I want to hear it, I want to do something for you. That's the picture.
Well, I was just thinking, we talked about how the angels rejoice, you know, they threw a party for me when I finally turned. Yes, we finally got her.
Loveless, I see, love, E-L-Y, in Samuel 1:23, they'll flip, was it 4:5, or lovers, and that being in Kings 5, and Psalms
Well,
88.
In total, he's talking about
Yeah,
those who value righteousness.
yeah,
That's what God finds lovely.
yeah.
That's what he finds
Mhm.
attractive.
Well,
That's who he's here.
what changed for me over the years is when I realized that these words that God has blessed us with, this gift of his inspired word, are his love letters to us. And you don't ever get a love letter from someone that you adore, and you read the first sentence and you lay the letter down, and you walk away maybe weeks or months, and then you go, oh, I think I'll read another few sentences. And then you lay it back down, oh, maybe I'll read another few sentences. No, you want to devour that whole letter. And that's the way we need to feel about God's love letters to us, because he's revealing himself to us. He's revealing what he desires from us to him. And should be our food. It's what Christ said. He said, my Father's will is my food. What he desires of me is like my food. And I think it's until we train ourselves to feel that way about it, you don't get it.
You know, when you look at all of these proverbs, it always starts out, the Lord detests the way of the wicked. We always have to remember, he loves everyone.
He does.
Their ways are the
The
abomination.
ways are the things that he doesn't like.
Right.
And that we all, you know, it's like you said, that love letter is to all. But it's they're deciding whether they're going to follow those ways. And they decide to do something different, so that those ways are detestable to him. Not specifically the person, it's what they're
Person
doing.
he loves. This is like Jesus's parable of the prodigal son. That father, when he saw him turn and coming back, he ran to him. And that is what we have a promise of, that when we turn back to God, he's going to run out to meet us.
Because he always loved his son.
He always loved him. Never stopped loving him.
And he's always there, even for the most detestable, wicked
There to
person.
forgive, whatever.
He's always there,
Mhm.
but they have to do the turning.
Mhm.
And you can't have somebody do it for you.
No.
Just 1 Peter 3, verse 12, for the Psalms. And he says, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open for their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil.
You get the sense that all God's senses are at work. And directed action, whatever. We see it in the next proverb, we're considering Proverbs 10 and verse 24. First, he's attracted to you. He finds you lovable. Then he wants to hear your prayers. In Proverbs 10 and verse 24, what's he doing? He's granting their desires. Interesting passage, again, contrasted with the wicked. What the wicked fears will come upon him, but the desire of the righteous will be granted. What's it mean? Will come upon him really is, will come down on him. Ruin is going down on him. Why is that what he fears going to come down on him? Because evil is what he desired, isn't it? You know, the general mindset of the world seems to be, well, how can God condemn someone for evil, and how can, well, he's only giving people what they desire, is he not? And what they what they've chosen. Well, you know, at last when the wicked fears what might be coming upon him, well, it's really already on upon him because that's what he desired. But on the righteous, what's coming upon them is what is assigned to each kind of people. There are wicked people, there are righteous people. And from the beginning, God has revealed what is assigned to each person, isn't it? On the wicked comes this kind of recompense. On the righteous comes this other kind of recompense. It's what assigned. It is coming. And we get, in effect, we get exactly what we desire. What else? We got just a minute. What else is God doing for those he finds lovely and lovable? Proverbs 10, verse 23. He's caring for, he's providing for even their physical needs. Proverbs 10, verse 3, the Lord will not allow the righteous to hunger, but he will reject the craving of the wicked. I like this proverb because it reminds us that in every man, there is a God-shaped hole. You've heard it said, in every person there's a God-shaped hole. And some people will be filled and well content to do what is good and right, but others can never be satisfied. You can't satisfy that hole in them. It's like a bottomless pit that can't be filled. So it gets right down to the heart of the matter. On what is your hope fixed? On earthly riches or on your God? And again, it's one of these things we see throughout our Bibles, cover to cover. Anyone whose focus is fixed on earthly things, or even in the Revelation it talks about those who dwell on the earth, those are fleshly-minded people. That God-shaped hole, the soul, is never going to be satisfied. That God will care even for the physical needs of those who seek righteousness. And with that, let's wrap it up right there. Again, good to be